My name is Jax Carter, and I was exactly 26 years old when I sat at a cold kitchen table and signed the adoption papers for a baby girl. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to have my back, told me straight to my face that this one decision would absolutely wreck my life. I was single. I was living in a modest two-bedroom apartment where the only furniture of note was a crib I'd sweated over, assembling it myself with a cheap hex key and sheer willpower. I had a career in child protective services, pulling in maybe $42,000 a year if I worked every bit of overtime available. No husband in the picture, no nest egg or savings account to brag about, and zero family members lined up to help with the 3 a.m. diaper blowouts or the soul-crushing sleep deprivation. My mother looked at me and said, "Jax, you can't even keep your own head above water." My father followed up with the knockout punch. "That kid is going to be the end of you." But here's the kicker. The very same day I brought my daughter home from the agency, the same afternoon I held her in my arms for the first time and fed her a bottle on a thrift store couch, a letter showed up in my mailbox. It was high-end cream paper, monogrammed with my mother's initials. It wasn't a congratulations card. It wasn't a welcome to the family note. What none of them realized back then was that 14 years later, that same, life-ruining, baby girl would be standing at a podium in front of 300 people, clearing her throat, and reading that exact letter out loud for the world to hear. Welcome back to Real Reddit Revenge. This is the place where we talk about the long game, family secrets, and the kind of justice that tastes better the longer it simmers. If you've ever been counted out by the people who should have loved you most, drop a comment below. Seriously, hit that subscribe button, because just thinking about how this ends still makes my hands shake. Before Lily came into the picture, before that toxic letter, and before the world turned upside down, I was just a caseworker. I spent my days in the county's CPS office, a beige-on-beige cubicle farm under flickering fluorescent lights that hummed like a disturbed beehive every time it rained. My desk was a graveyard of manila folders, one stack for active cases, one for the maybe tomorrow reviews, and a third stack, the one that kept me up at night, for the kids I couldn't stop worrying about once the clock hit 5:00 p.m. I was top tier at my job. I knew exactly what a stable home looked like on a government checklist. I could sniff out a bad foster placement from a mile away. By the time I hit 25, I'd written 50 home studies. I knew the system inside and out. I believed in it, for the most part, even though I watched it crash and burn on a weekly basis. I was also 24 when my doctor sat me down and told me I had stage 3 endometriosis. She said it with that clinical, detached calm that doctors use when they're delivering life-altering news. She broke down the implications, which is a fancy way of saying my body wasn't playing fair. I asked the only question that mattered. Can I still have kids? She looked at me with pity and said it was highly unlikely. She told me to explore my options while I was still young. I didn't tell my parents for 6 months. I kept that pain locked in a vault. When I finally broke the news at a Sunday family dinner, somewhere between the side salad and the pot roast, my mother, Donna, set her fork down with a deliberate clink. She looked at me and said, "Well, maybe that's just God's way of saying you aren't meant to be a mother, Jax." She said it like she was handing out some profound, holy wisdom. My father didn't even look up. He just reached for the bread basket. My sister, Stacy, suddenly found her dinner plate very interesting. I drove home that night with the windows rolled down, the cold air hitting my face, and my knuckles turning white against the steering wheel. I didn't let a single tear fall. The next morning, I went to work and opened a new folder. Inside was a file for a newborn girl who had been surrendered at the regional hospital 3 days prior. No family, no leads, no placement. I read it. Then I read it again. Something in my chest just clicked. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know I had. It took me 4 grueling months to finish a home study on myself. I knew the rules. I'd used them to judge hundreds of other people. Background checks, financial deep dives, home inspections, personal references. I did it all. I asked my boss, Margaret Hayes, to write one of my references. She just laughed and told me she'd been waiting for me to finally ask. When the green light finally flashed, I decided to tell the fam. I chose Sunday dinner again. I don't know why I kept going back to the lion's den. Maybe because that dining room table was the only courtroom my mother actually respected. I waited until everyone was served. Donna was at the head of the table, my dad across from me, and Stacy next to her husband, Greg, who was already busy shoveling chicken into his mouth. "I've been approved to adopt," I said, my voice steady. "A baby girl from the system. I'm going through the matching process next week." The silence was deafening. Donna set her fork down slowly, the power move she used when she wanted the entire room to stop breathing. "You can't even take care of yourself, Jax," she said. She didn't yell. My mother never yelled. She just spoke with a coldness that turned the room to ice. My father just shook his head. "That child is going to ruin your life. Think about what you're doing to this family's reputation." I looked at Stacy for help, but she was busy staring at her napkin like it held the secrets to the universe. "She's not a problem, Mom," I said. "She's a human being. She's a baby." Donna leaned back, looking disgusted. "And what am I supposed to tell the ladies at church? That my daughter is busy raising someone else's mistake?" "She isn't someone else's mistake. She's mine." "She is a mistake," my mother snapped. "And you're choosing this over everything we've built for you." I didn't argue. I just put my napkin on the table, stood up, and walked out the door. Nobody followed me, not even my sister. The drive home took 37 minutes, and for the first time in years, I didn't even turn on the radio. I just sat in the quiet. Let's talk about my sister for a second. Stacy married Greg when she was 23. They had a house by 25 because Donna and my dad handed them a $40,000 gift for the down payment. Not a loan, a gift. And Donna made sure every person within a 50-mile radius knew about her generosity. When Stacy got pregnant, my mother threw a shower that looked like a royal wedding. 3-tier cakes, professional decor, the whole 9 yards. My mother cried during the toast, talking about how her baby was having a baby, and the whole room clapped like it was a miracle. When Stacy had her second kid, my mother moved in for 2 weeks to play super grandma, cooking, cleaning, and telling everyone that being a grandma was her soul's purpose. For me, I got a letter telling me not to bother coming home. 2 weeks after that disastrous dinner, Stacy called me at 11 p.m. She was whispering like she was hiding in a closet. "Jax, I'm so sorry. I wish I could help, but you know how Mom gets." Mom gets what, Stacy? She won't let it go. And if I take your side, she'll turn on me and Greg, too. I can't risk it. "So you're picking a side by not picking one." There was a long pause. "I just can't get in the middle of this." "You've always been in the middle, Stacy. You just finally picked the side with the bigger paycheck." I hung up. Stacy got the 3-tier cake and the 40 guests. I got an envelope that felt like lead. I didn't hold it against her, not then. But I didn't forget it either. There's a massive difference between forgiving someone and losing your memory. I had plenty of room in my head for both. The day I finally went to pick up Lily was a Thursday in March. It was raining, one of those steady, gray New York rains that makes the whole world feel like it's moving in slow motion. I wore a simple navy cardigan and flats. I'd packed the diaper bag 3 times the night before, then checked it again at 5 a.m. because my brain wouldn't shut off. Margaret drove me. She told me I was too in my head to be behind the wheel, and she was 100% right. The agency was in an old converted office building on Prospect Street. Beige walls, buzzing lights, the usual. The caseworker, Diana, gave me a knowing smile. "Ready to be a mom." "I've been ready for years," I told her. They brought her out in a white blanket, 7 pounds. 4 ounces of tiny human with deep brown eyes that were already scanning those buzzing lights like she was trying to figure out the electrical wiring. She had this tiny, tight fist, and when I reached out, she wrapped it around my pinky finger. It felt like she'd been waiting for my hand specifically. I signed the papers in a cramped room on a table that had one leg shorter than the others. Manila folders, blue ink, my name on pages 11, 14, and 22. Diana handed me the final paperwork and said, "Congratulations, Mom." I didn't even have words. I just nodded. Margaret was in the corner crying her eyes out, even though she promised she wouldn't. I drove Lily home in a car seat I had installed and reinstalled 4 times that week just to be sure. My apartment was small, but it was spotless. I'd put up a mobile with little wooden stars that spun around. I laid Lily down, and she just stared at those stars. Then I went to the mailbox. The envelope was heavy, expensive, the kind of stationery you use when you want the person reading it to feel small. Monogrammed, D.C., Donna Carter. My mother hadn't sent a card. She sent a manifesto. I carried it inside while Lily slept on my chest. I let it sit on the counter while I warmed a bottle, feeling its weight from across the room. I finally opened it standing up. Jax, I cannot and will not support this. You are throwing your entire future away for someone else's massive mistake. This child comes from God knows where. You don't know her history, her parents, or what kind of baggage she's going to dump into your life. And you expect us to just play house and pretend this is normal. Don't come home. Don't call us. Don't bring her here. Until you snap out of this, you are officially on your own. Mom. I read it twice. Then I folded it back up, found an old shoebox from some boots I bought in college, and tucked the letter inside. I put that box on the highest shelf in my closet. Then I went and fed my baby. That was the only thing that mattered. I didn't cry that night. I wanted to, but the words felt like a jagged stone stuck in my throat. Besides, Lily needed a bottle at midnight, and again at 3 a.m. By the time the sun came up, I was too exhausted to be sad. I told myself I'd deal with the letter later. Later turned into 14 years. That first year was a total gauntlet. I'd survived a lot, but this was different. No babysitters, no neighbors dropping off casseroles, no check-in calls from my mother. Daycare had a 3-month wait list. I had to go back to work at 8 weeks because I'd burned through my leave, and the county isn't exactly known for being generous to single moms. Margaret actually let me keep Lily in her office for 2 weeks until a spot opened up at a local daycare. $160 a week, money I didn't really have. Lily had colic, too. The kind where she'd start screaming at 6 p.m. and wouldn't stop until the early hours of the morning. I spent months packing my hallway in my socks, bouncing her and humming made-up songs because I was too tired to remember real lyrics. My neighbor in 4B actually pounded on my door at midnight once. "Can you shut that kid up?" "I'm doing my best, sir," I whispered through the door. "Try harder," he yelled. I just kept walking. Margaret started leaving frozen meals on my porch once a week. No notes, just Tupperware and pure kindness. When Christmas rolled around, Donna hosted a huge dinner for 14 people. I wasn't on the guest list. Stacy sent a text. "Merry Christmas, Jax, miss you." I didn't even reply. I bought a 2-foot plastic tree from the dollar store and put one single ornament on it, a silver bell Margaret gave us. Lily was 9 months old, sitting in her high chair, staring at that bell like it was made of solid gold. The second year got easier. Not easy, just manageable. Lily started sleeping through the night, and I finally caught up on 2 years of lost rest. I got a promotion to senior caseworker and a small raise. I found a foreclosure on Birch Lane, a tiny 2-bedroom with a backyard that looked like a jungle. The bank wanted $68K. I offered $62K and they bit. Margaret helped me move. "You're building something real here, Jax," she said as we carried boxes. "I'm just buying a house, Margaret." "No," she insisted. "You're building a life." I fixed the fence myself. I painted Lily's room a soft yellow. Her first word was mama at 14 months. I was washing dishes when she said it, clear as a bell. I dropped everything, picked her up, and told her, "That's right, I'm mama." I started a tradition then. Every night I'd tell her, "I chose you, Lily. Before you could even walk or talk, I chose you, and I'd do it 1,000 times over." She didn't get the words yet, but she felt the vibe. My dad sent a birthday card that year. For my birthday, not Lily's, just his signature, no note. I threw it in a drawer and moved on. Some doors stay shut for a reason. By the time Lily was 5, her teacher called me in for a meeting. I braced myself for bad news, but Mrs. Huang was smiling. "Jax, Lily is reading at a 4th grade level. She's in kindergarten." I just sat there. For 5 years, I'd been told this child would ruin my life, and here she was, 3 years ahead of every other kid. Is that a problem? I asked. It's a miracle, she laughed. Lily was the it girl of her class, not because she was popular, but because she was kind. She shared her stuff. She helped other kids tie their shoes. She knew she was adopted because I told her the truth early on. You grew in another lady's tummy, but you grew in my heart. One night she asked, but you're my real mommy, right? Always, I said. Especially because I didn't have to pick you, I wanted to pick you. She liked that. We had our rituals, like Tuesday library trips where we'd leave with more books than we could carry. She was 6.5, perfect in every way, and my family still hadn't even seen her face. Then on a random Wednesday, my phone rang. Caller ID, Mom. I hadn't seen that name on my screen in years. I turned the stove down and stepped into the hall. Hello. Jax, it's your mother. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I finally met her. I leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Her name is Lily. I know what her name is, she said sharply. But look, people in town don't really know the details. I was thinking we could meet somewhere private. A park, just us. Somewhere private, I repeated. Why? You know, without any labels for now, it's just easier. I let that word, labels, hang in the air. You mean you don't want to be called Grandma? I just think it's too soon for all that complexity, Jax. It's been 6 years, Mom. You're either her grandmother or you're a stranger. I'm not introducing you as some lady from the park. She deserves better than that. I could hear her breathing get sharp. That Karen huff she does when she's told no. I'll call you back, she snapped. She didn't call back for another 3 years. I didn't care. I had a daughter to raise and a purple horse to color. Then came that Tuesday in the grocery store. I was grabbing a box of Cheerios when someone touched my elbow. Jax Carter. I turned around, and there she was. It took me a solid 3 seconds to place the face. Then the memory hit me like a bucket of ice water. Barbara Nolan. She was a pillar of my mother's social circle, First Baptist Book Club, the annual bake sales, the head of the Donna Carter Appreciation Society. Oh, honey, Barbara said, leaning in with a look that was half pity, half perfume. I heard you've been struggling so much lately. Is everything okay? I set the box of Cheerios into my cart with slow, deliberate precision. I kept my voice flat. What exactly did she tell you, Barbara? Barbara's fake polite smile faltered. Just that, well, that you took on way more than you could handle. That you're having a really hard time keeping your head above water with, you know, the whole situation. Having a hard time, I repeated. She said the entire situation has been incredibly difficult for you, Barbara whispered, as if she were sharing a state secret. That you're barely managing to keep things together. I looked at Barbara. She was wearing pearl earrings and a layer of concern that didn't belong to her. She was looking at me like I was a charity case. Barbara, listen closely, I said. I am currently the program supervisor at Child Protective Services. I manage a staff of 12 professionals and an annual budget. My daughter is in the gifted program at Millbrook Elementary. She reads at a 6th grade level and just took home 2nd place in the county science fair. Barbara's mouth opened, then snapped shut like a landed fish. We're doing just fine, I added. Oh, she stammered. Well, I see. I know exactly what you see, I said, turning my cart around. Barbara shifted her weight, clutching her designer purse. Well, it's good to hear you're doing well, Jax, truly. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, but my hands were shaking on the handle of the cart. It wasn't just anger. It was the chilling realization of what had been happening for the last 6 years. Donna hadn't just rejected me. She had been narrating my failure to every person in town. Every book club, every church potluck, every holiday party. I could hear her voice in my head. Poor Jax. She's so stubborn, but she's clearly in over her head. That child is more than she can handle. My mother had spent 6 years painting me as a disaster to make herself look like the wise one who warned me. And I found out the truth in the cereal aisle on a random Tuesday. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. I did something better. I kept building. In third grade, Lily brought home a family tree project. It was one of those worksheets with empty branches reaching out like arms, waiting for names that weren't in our house. She sat at the kitchen table, pencil poised. "Mom, do I have grandparents?" I stopped what I was doing and sat down across from her. I chose my words the way I write court reports, carefully, precisely, and without any sharp edges that could cut a child. "You do, Lily. They live about 40 minutes from here." "Why don't they ever visit us?" "Sometimes," I said, "adults make decisions that hurt other people, and sometimes they don't know how to fix what they broke." She looked at the paper, then back at me. "Did they make a decision about me?" "They made a decision about both of us." "Were they mean to you?" "I think they were scared," I told her. "And when people are scared, they say things they can't take back." Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her green and brown crayons. She didn't ask about aunts or uncles. She just drew 2 branches, 2 names, Jax and Lily. She colored that tree with so much pressure the wax was thick on the page. "There," she said firmly, "that's our family." I looked at that tree. No grandparents, no cousins, no Stacy or Greg, just us. "That's our family," I agreed. She got an A. That night after she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway outside my closet. The shoebox was still there on the top shelf, right where it had sat for 9 years. I hadn't moved it, but I thought about it. I thought about the words inside it while I listened to the sound of my daughter breathing in the next room. Then I closed the door. Some things are better left in the dark. The big promotion came on a Friday. The county administrator called me into his office and offered me the position of program director. I'd be running the entire county's CPS program. My salary would jump to $78,000, more than double what I was making the day I brought Lily home. I'd be overseeing 6 supervisors, 42 caseworkers, and a multi-million-dollar budget. I said yes, before he could even finish the sentence. Margaret called me that evening. She was retired now, living in a cottage by the lake and growing tomatoes. "I told you, Jax," she said. "The day you brought that baby home, I told you that you were building something. Look at you now." The local paper ran a profile on me, from caseworker to county leader. They used my official headshot, the one where I'm standing in front of the department seal, with a look on my face that Margaret called quietly terrifying. I clipped the article and put it on the fridge right next to Lily's honor roll certificate. Stacy saw it online. She sent a text. "Congratulations, Jax." No emoji. "No, I'm proud of you." Just 7 letters and a period. "Thank you," I wrote back. 8 letters and a period. I knew Donna saw it too. I knew because Barbara Nolan accidentally ran into me at the pharmacy a week later. "Your mother mentioned the newspaper article," she said. Barbara looked surprised, not proud, not happy, just genuinely shocked. It was like they'd been waiting 12 years for me to crash and burn, and they didn't know how to handle the fact that I was soaring. Lily turned 13 that summer, and that was the year she found the one thing I'd been hiding for half her life. I was finally renovating my master closet. I'd asked Lily to help me clear out the old boxes while I ran to the hardware store for shelf brackets. "Just stack them in the hall," I told her. "I'll sort through them later." I was gone for 45 minutes. When I got back, the hallway was lined with boxes, old photo albums, tax returns from 2015 winter gear. And there, sitting slightly to the left, was the shoebox. The lid was on, but it was tilted, just enough to show that someone had picked it up, looked inside, and replaced it. Lily was in the kitchen, earbuds in, hunched over her homework. She didn't look up when I walked by. "Thanks for the help, Lil." "No problem," she mumbled. I went to the hallway, picked up the box, and opened it. The cream-colored envelope was still there. I saw the original fold line from 13 years ago, but there was a new crease, a small, tight one in the corner, the kind of crease made by a hand trembling with anger. She'd read it. She knew what her grandmother had called her, someone else's mistake. I waited for her to say something. She didn't, not that night, not that week. She carried those words somewhere deep inside her, somewhere I couldn't reach. But she changed after that, not in a way most people would notice, but I saw it. She started asking more questions about the early years. What was it like when I was a baby? Were you scared, Mom? Terrified every single day, I admitted. But you didn't give up. Giving up wasn't an option, Lily. She started journaling more, too. I'd see her at her desk late at night, her hair falling over her face as she scribbled furiously. If I knocked, she'd snap the book shut and claim it was just homework. It definitely wasn't homework. One night in October, while she was doing the dishes, she asked me, Mom, if someone wrote something really mean about you, would you want people to know the truth? I put my pen down. It depends on who wrote it and why. What if it was someone who was supposed to love you? Then, I said slowly, the truth matters a lot more than keeping their secrets. She nodded, filing that answer away. Okay. I didn't read another word of my case files that night. I just stared at the same paragraph for 10 minutes, thinking about that shoebox. I told her the truth mattered. I didn't realize she was taking notes for a manifesto. By the time 8th grade was in full swing, her teachers were calling her the strongest student they'd seen in a decade. When they announced she was valedictorian, nobody was surprised. If you've ever had a family member tell you that you'd never amount to anything, and then you went out and absolutely crushed it, drop a comment below. I want to hear how you proved them wrong. And stick around, because what happens at the graduation ceremony is something I still can't talk about without my heart racing. In December, Principal Owens called me. Ms. Carter, Lily is our valedictorian. She'll be giving the commencement speech in June. It's Ms. Carter, I corrected him with a smile. And yes, she will. I sat at my desk and thought back to the day I signed her papers on that wobbling table. 14 years from a manila folder to a podium. That evening, Lily came home and set her bag down with a look of pure, cold determination. I want to write my own speech, she said. Can I? Of course, it's your moment. I already know exactly what I want to say. I should have asked for a draft. I should have sat her down and talked it through. But I didn't. I trusted her. She earned that trust every single day for 14 years. Then say it, I told her. She gave me a smile that wasn't her usual one. It was deeper. It was a plan. I called Donna in March. I sat on the edge of my bed for 20 minutes before I finally hit dial. The number was still in my phone. I don't know why. Maybe for the same reason I kept the letter. Hello, her voice was the same. A little older, but with that same condescending cadence, like she was doing the world a favor by answering. Mom, it's Jax. A long pause. Jax. Lily is graduating 8th grade in June. She's valedictorian. She's giving the commencement speech. Silence, then, valedictorian, well, that's impressive. She said impressive the way people say interesting when they're actually annoyed. June 14th, 2 p.m. at the middle school. We'll be there, she said quickly, too quickly, like she was already picking out an outfit to impress her friends. I wasn't doing this for a reconciliation. I didn't want her forgiveness. I did it because Lily deserved to see a full auditorium, and because a small, petty part of me wanted Donna to see exactly what she had missed out on. I told Lily that night, I invited your grandparents. She didn't look up from her desk. Good, they should come. She said, should the way a prosecutor says the defendant may take the stand. Donna prepared for that graduation like it was a presidential campaign. Stacy called me to warn me. Mom's being weird, Jax. She's telling everyone she's reconnecting with you. She bought a new lavender dress and told her book club her granddaughter is valedictorian. She hasn't used that word in 14 years. She's acting like she's always been there, Stacy said. She hasn't. I know. Are you coming, Stacy? The kids have a soccer tournament that day, she said. I almost laughed. Stacy had a whole library of reasons for why she couldn't show up. I didn't even get angry anymore. Anger requires expectations, and I'd stopped expecting anything from my sister a long time ago. The next week, Barbara Nolan stopped me at the post office. Your mother is so excited. She told the whole book club that Lily takes after the Carter side, smart as a whip. I just looked at her. My mother was claiming credit for a child she'd spent a decade calling a mistake. Lily worked on that speech every night for 3 weeks. She'd sit with her door closed, reading the words aloud to test the rhythm. When I offered to help, she just said, "No, Mom, this one is all mine." I noticed her going through old photo albums, the blurry ones I took with a cheap camera because I was broke. Lily in the crib, Lily on a blanket. She asked casual questions over dinner. "How old was I when you first held me? Did anyone help you in the beginning?" "Just Margaret," I told her. She was the only one. One night I passed her room and saw her holding that cream-colored envelope. The monogram DC was visible in the lamplight. I didn't stop. I went to bed and watched the ceiling fan spin. My daughter had the letter. She was putting something together and I was going to let her. She earned the right to finish it. June 14th, 82 degrees by noon. I ironed Lily's white dress while she ate breakfast. She was unnervingly calm. "Nervous?" I asked. "No," she said, wiping her mouth. "I know exactly what I'm going to say." We drove to the school in my old Honda. The lot was packed, and there in the second row was the silver sedan, my mother's car. "They're here," Lily said. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation that the target was in sight. "They're here." Jax didn't move her eyes from the visor mirror as she said it. She was in the zone. She adjusted her graduation cap with surgical precision, smoothed the front of her gown, and then did that quick pocket check, the sharp, subconscious tap people do when they're carrying something worth more than gold. I saw it clearly, the unmistakable rectangular outline of that heavy, cream-colored envelope tucked deep inside her gown pocket. She caught me looking at her in the reflection. Those deep brown eyes, my daughter's eyes, held my gaze with a level of raw, unshakable certainty. I hadn't taught her that specific brand of grit. She had forged it herself over 14 years of being just us against the world. "You ready for this, Mom?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. We walked into the gymnasium together, the humid June air already thick with the smell of floor wax and cheap perfume. Margaret was already there, holding down the fort in the third row, center. She'd cleared her whole schedule for this, wearing a bright coral blouse and a smile that told me she wouldn't have missed this for $1 million lottery ticket. Lily gave my hand one last squeeze before disappearing backstage, her gown perfectly pressed, and that letter burning a hole in her pocket. Then, the guest of honors made their entrance. Donna and Richard didn't just walk in. They processed like they were the ones receiving the diplomas. My mother was decked out in a high-end lavender dress, her hair done up in one of those expensive salon blowouts she usually saves for the country club's Christmas Eve gala. She had on her statement pearls, the ones she wears specifically when she wants to intimidate people. Richard was trailing 2 steps behind her in a crisp navy blazer and khakis, sporting a crease so sharp it could have cut the gym floor. They didn't even look for me. They marched straight down the center aisle to the front row, the VIP section. Not the third row, not the middle, the absolute front. Donna was waving at people like she was the grand marshal of a parade, flashing that fake, polished, First Baptist smile she uses when she's performing for an audience. They claimed 2 seats right at the edge of the aisle. Margaret leaned in and whispered, "Are those the grandparents? In theory, at least." Donna finally turned around to scan the crowd. When she spotted me sitting in the third row, she didn't wave. She didn't smile. She gave me a stiff, clinical nod, the kind of acknowledgement you give a distant relative you're legally obligated to notice, but don't actually like. Richard raised a hand halfway before dropping it back to his side like a lead weight. Then I heard it. My mother leaned over to the woman sitting next to her, some stranger in a floral dress, and said, loud enough for half the gym to hear, "Our granddaughter is the valedictorian today. We're just so incredibly proud of our girl." Our granddaughter? She used the word "our" like she'd been the one changing diapers, paying for braces, and staying up late to study for science tests. I felt Margaret's hand on my arm, steady, warm, and keeping me from standing up right then and there. The ceremony kicked off. We had the national anthem, a student violin solo that echoed off the metal rafters, and the usual opening remarks. Awards were handed out, names were called, and the air was thick with the sound of parents cheering and iPhones clicking. Finally, Principal Owens stepped back to the microphone, adjusting his glasses. And now, it is my distinct honor to introduce our valedictorian for the class of 2026, Lily Carter. The entire room shifted. Donna sat up like she was at a presidential inauguration. I completely stopped breathing. Lily walked to that podium with the posture of a veteran litigator. Her back was straight as a board, her white dress visible beneath the flowing graduation robe. She carried a single sheet of paper and that infamous cream envelope. She adjusted the mic. The previous speaker was a 6-foot-tall teacher, and she was barely 5'2". She scanned the 300 faces in the auditorium looking for her anchor. She found me first, third row center, and gave me a small, private smile, the kind that says, "I've got this, Mom." Then her gaze shifted. She locked eyes with Donna in the front row. She held that look for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Not a hostile look, not a warm one, just a cold, hard confirmation of the target. "Good afternoon," Lily began, her voice projecting with zero nerves. "My name is Lily Carter. I'm 14 years old, and today, for my final words to this school, I want to talk about the true meaning of family." She did the standard thank yous first. The teachers, the coaches, the school board, even the janitor who always unlocked the science lab early so she could run experiments before first period. Then she paused. She took her prepared speech and physically set it to the side of the podium. "But there is one person in this room I need to thank more than anyone else in this world." I felt my throat tighten into a knot. I thought she was about to give a standard "thanks, Mom" tribute. I was completely unprepared for the reality. "My mother adopted me from the foster care system when she was 26 years old," Lily said. The auditorium went so quiet you could hear a fly buzz. She was single. She had zero family support. She had no husband to help with the bills and no savings account to lean on. She signed the papers to give me a life in a cramped room with a wobbly table while a caseworker looked at her and said, "Congratulations, Mom." If you're watching this right now, pay close attention. This is the part that changed everything. If you've ever been told you weren't enough by the people who were supposed to have your back, stay right here. Because Lily was about to drop the truth on everyone. "My mom worked 50-hour weeks for this county." Lily's voice didn't waver. "She drove me to every single science fair. She was at every book club meeting. She read to me every single night until I was old enough to read the news to her. She made me scrambled eggs every morning and tucked handwritten notes into my lunchbox. Notes I still keep in my desk drawer to this day because they were the only proof I had that I was loved." I didn't even know she'd saved those notes. Tears were already hot in my eyes. "She did all of this completely alone," Lily said. The word "alone" landing like a heavy stone. Because her family chose not to help. They chose to walk away because they didn't approve of how I came into this world. The ripple of shock moved through the room like an earthquake. I saw Donna shift in her seat, her face turning a muddy shade of pink. Richard stared at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. "I spent years wondering why I didn't have grandparents," Lily said. "Why there were no birthday cards in the mail. Why there was no one at Christmas except me and my mom and a 2-foot tree from the dollar store. I wondered what was wrong with me. But last year, I finally found the answer." Slowly, with a deliberate chill, Lily reached into her gown pocket and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. Under the harsh gymnasium lights, those embossed DC initials practically screamed. She held that envelope with both hands, showing the entire room that it weighed more than just paper. "My grandmother wrote my mother a letter the day she adopted me," Lily said. Donna's face went from pink to ghost white in a split second. The color drained out of her cheeks like someone had pulled a literal plug. She looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I'd like to read it to you," Lily said. The auditorium was so quiet it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 300 people and not a single cough or rustle. Lily unfolded the letter. Her hands were like granite, not a single shake. "Dear Jax," she began. She read it the way a prosecutor reads a verdict. "I cannot and will not support this decision." 300 people, neighbors, teachers, strangers, heard my mother's cold, calculated cruelty. Every syllable, every biting word she'd written at her kitchen table on that designer stationery 14 years ago. You are throwing your entire life away for someone else's mistake, Lily read. A woman in the row behind me let out an audible gasp of horror. That child comes from God knows where, Lily continued, her eyes flickering down to the front row. You don't know her parents, you don't know her history, you don't know what kind of problems she'll bring into your life. I looked at Donna. She was gripping the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles were turning purple. Her jaw was clenched so tight I thought her teeth might shatter. Richard sat beside her like a frozen statue, staring straight ahead but seeing absolutely nothing. And you expect us to pretend this is normal? Lily paused, letting the weight of that question fill the room like smoke. Don't come home, don't call, don't bring her here. Until you come to your senses, you are officially on your own. Signed, Mom. Silence, total, absolute, heavy-duty gymnasium silence. You could hear the hum of the AC unit and the ticking of the wall clock. Margaret grabbed my hand and squeezed it with everything she had. I was crying openly now, silent, hot tears running down my face and dripping onto the crumpled program in my lap. My daughter, my girl, was standing on that stage holding the very words that were meant to destroy her. Lily folded the letter back up with haunting slowness. That letter was written 14 years ago about me, about a baby that someone had the nerve to call someone else's mistake. She let that phrase hang in the air for 300 people to hold. Well, that mistake is standing here as your valedictorian today. She looked directly at me. My mother never told me about this letter. She kept it in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet because she doesn't throw things away. She keeps everything that actually matters to her. She took a breath that could be heard in the back row, including me. Someone behind me started to sob, a raw, recognized sound. She didn't adopt me to prove a point, Lily said, her voice finally cracking just a tiny bit. She didn't do it to win an argument or show anyone they were wrong. She adopted me because she believed I deserved a chance at a life, and she gave me one every single day for 14 years. So, to my mother, Jax Carter, thank you for choosing me when the people who were supposed to love you wouldn't. Thank you for building a family out of Library Tuesdays and scrambled eggs. You were enough. You were always more than enough. The applause didn't just start, it exploded. One person stood, then 10, then the entire auditorium was on their feet. Teachers were standing, parents were cheering, and students were pulling off their caps to clap. Margaret was on her feet before anyone in our row, crying and cheering without an ounce of shame. I couldn't move. I just sat there with my hands in my lap and tears running down my face, listening to 300 people tell my daughter she was right. The applause was still roaring when Donna stood up. The sound of her metal chair scraping the linoleum was sharp and sudden, like a knife through silk. She grabbed her designer purse, didn't look left, didn't look right, and definitely didn't look at the stage where her granddaughter was still standing. Richard followed. He always followed. He stood up 2 seconds later, adjusted his blazer, and walked out behind her the same way he'd walked behind her for 40 years. They marched down the center aisle, the same aisle they'd processed down 90 minutes earlier, claiming credit and waving at strangers. Everyone watched them go. Some people actually turned their heads to watch the lavender dress disappear through the double doors. They left behind 2 empty chairs in the front row and 2 programs abandoned on the cushions. Lily watched them leave from the podium. She didn't flinch. She didn't call out. She just held that cream envelope at her side and watched her grandparents walk out on her for the second time in her life. The first time, she was 3 days old and couldn't remember it. This time, she'd remember every single step they took. Principal Owens stepped back to the mic after a beat of silence that felt like a lifetime. Thank you, Lily. That was truly extraordinary. The applause came back even louder than before. People who had sat down stood right back up. Someone whistled. A teacher in the second row was openly wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Lily stepped away from the podium, her body finally shaking slightly from the adrenaline release. She walked backstage with her cap tilted and the cream envelope gripped in her hand like a trophy. I stood up and Margaret let go of my arm. Go, she whispered. Go get your daughter. I found her backstage, tucked between a rack of spare gowns and a folding table. She saw me and just ran. She hit me at full speed, 14 years old and still small enough to fit perfectly under my chin. I caught her and held her so tight I thought we'd fuse together. I pressed my face into her hair and breathed in the smell of her green apple shampoo. "Are you mad at me?" she whispered into my shoulder. "Not in a million years," I choked out. "I found it last summer," she said, "in the shoebox when we were moving things." "I know," I said. "I saw that you'd moved the box." She pulled back to look at me, those brown eyes searching mine. "Why did you keep it, Mom? Why didn't you just burn it?" "Because," I told her, "it reminded me why I could never go back to that house. And why I had to keep moving forward for you. Was it? Was it too much, reading it up there?" I cupped her face in both my hands. "That letter was written about both of us, Lily. You had every right to let the world hear it." She nodded, swallowed hard, and then buried her face back in my shoulder. Margaret appeared a moment later, her eyes red but a massive smile on her face. That was the single best graduation speech I have heard in 30 years of education, and I am not exaggerating for effect. Other parents started trickling backstage. There were handshakes and hugs from people I barely knew. A father with tears in his beard shook my hand and said, "Your daughter is absolutely remarkable. You did a hell of a job." "I know," I said. "I know she is." The phone rang at 7:43 p.m. that evening. Donna's number. I didn't even think about answering. I just let it go to voicemail. The message was 72 seconds long. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't sad. She was absolutely, traditionally furious. "How could you let her do that, Jax? How could you sit there and let that child humiliate us in front of the entire town? That letter was a private matter. You had no right to let her read it out loud like that. I will never forgive you for this, Jax. Never." I listened to it once, standing in the quiet of my kitchen while Lily was in the shower. Then I hit delete. I didn't feel the sting I used to feel. My mother had heard her own cruel words read back to her by the child she'd insulted, and her only response was to be angry that people heard them. She wasn't ashamed of what she wrote. She was just mad that she lost control of the narrative. Margaret called at 8 p.m. "Half the county is talking about that speech, Jax. Someone filmed it and posted it on the school's community page. It's already got 400 views." I sat down and closed my eyes. "Is it really?" "People are cheering for her, Jax. They're calling her a legend." Stacy finally texted at 9:15 p.m. "I saw the video someone posted. I'm so sorry, Jax, for everything, for not being there." I typed back, "Thank you." I didn't invite a longer conversation. Her apology was 14 years too late and sent through a glass screen. I accepted it the same way I accepted the few birthday cards my dad sent, as evidence of a conscience that was too small to actually change anything. Lily came out of the shower in her pajamas, her hair damp and smelling like apples. She sat on the couch next to me and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Want to go get ice cream? It's late, but I feel like I need a win." "Let's go," I said. We drove to the Dairy Queen on Route 7 and sat on the hood of my old Honda in the parking lot. We ate our cones while the June heat melted them faster than we could keep up. "Mom." "Yes, Lil. I'm really glad you chose me, even with the wobbly table and the small house." "Every single day, Lily," I told her. "I'd choose you every single day for the rest of my life." When we got home, the shoebox was back on the shelf, but the envelope was in Lily's room now. She'd placed it on her desk, right next to her valedictorian medal and her science fair ribbons. She earned that letter. She'd turned it from a weapon against her into a trophy of her own survival. 3 days later, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee. The house was quiet because Lily was still asleep, the deep, unbothered sleep of someone who has finally said what needed to be said. I sat in my old yard sale wicker chair and thought about the last 14 years. I thought about the manila folder, the 42K salary, the mac and cheese Christmases, and the letter. I thought about Donna, but the anger wasn't there anymore. I didn't even feel the need to forgive her. I just felt clarity. My mother wrote that letter to end my story before it even had a chance to start. She thought her word was the law. But 14 years later, her granddaughter unsealed that envelope and read it into a microphone for the whole world to hear. The same words, different hands, a completely different outcome. I didn't call Donna back. I never would. Not out of revenge, but out of peace. Some doors stay closed because you finally realize the person on the other side doesn't have anything you need. Family isn't just about who shares your DNA. It's about who chooses to stay when things get hard. Lily came downstairs at 9 a.m., her hair a mess and her eyes half closed. "Scrambled eggs?" she asked with a sleepy grin. "Scrambled eggs," I said, standing up. That's my story. 14 years, one toxic letter, and a daughter who finally gave me the justice I never could have asked for. If this story reminded you of someone who believed in you when nobody else would, share it with them. Subscribe to Real Reddit Revenge, drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.